Welcome to another video. Please like, share and subscribe for more amazing story. True God in Another Worlds, Tensura x Tbate, by Tempest_King_20. Chapter 46. The first day. PT.2 Rimuru Pav. As I made my way through the bustling hallways of the academy, the weight of numerous gazes bore down on me. The students, their eyes following my every move as I passed by, seemed keenly aware of my presence and uniform. Navigating my way to the next class, I couldn't help but notice the presence of numerous students who had formed bonds with mana beasts. They were not so impressive, like the student with a small horned rat perched on their shoulder. Another boy, seemingly around 15 years old, was proudly riding atop a majestic giant lizard, his chin held high in defiance. Although I couldn't identify the species of the lizard, one glance at the beast core pulsating with mana energy assured me that it was no less than a C-class mana beast. Entering the classroom for my next class, I was immediately struck by its unique layout. The room was shaped like a miniature arena, with a central battling platform encased in a shimmering barrier field. Rows upon rows of seats circled around the platform, providing a perfect view for the spectators. My eyes scanned the room, searching for a familiar face amidst the crowd. Finally, I spotted my younger brother sitting quietly in his seat. With a small smile, I approached him and took the empty seat beside him, giving him a friendly nudge. "Yo," I greeted him warmly. His face lit up with recognition as he greeted me back. "Hi, is she here?" "Yes, she arrived about an hour ago," I replied, sharing in his excitement. "She's already started her training with Cynthia." "That's great," he said with a thoughtful expression. "By the way, where's Sylvie?" I shrugged. "Haven't seen her. We got separated earlier, and she closed the bond between us." My brother's smile faltered slightly, concern evident in his eyes. "That's strange. Did something happen?" I shook my head, dismissing his worry. "No, nothing happened. She's probably just off exploring on her own." Just as our conversation reached its peak, a flash of white caught my peripheral vision. I turned to see Sylvie gracefully leaping onto the table in front of us. Her sleek body was adorned in pristine fur, gleaming under the soft glow of the hanging lamp above. "Where did you run off to, Sylvie?" Art's voice was a mixture of relief and reproach as he extended his hand to give her a gentle pat. Sylvie's voice resonated in our minds as she replied, "I've been out exploring." I raised an eyebrow in amusement and curiosity, noticing the remnants of food on her delicate face. "What's with the leftover food on your face?" Sylvie tilted her head in confusion, pawing at her face before realizing the mess. With a sheepish expression, she began to groom herself with delicate strokes of her pink tongue. "You went to the cafeteria and got some food, didn't you?" I teased, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "And no, they gave it to me," Sylvie protested, her voice tinged with guilt and embarrassment. A mischievous glimmer lit up my eyes as I leaned in closer, adopting a faux serious tone. "I'll have to inform your mothers about this little escapade, then." Sylvie's eyes widened in panic, her tail twitching nervously as she whined, "No." Before I could continue the playful banter, Art interjected with a chuckle. "Oh, come on, don't be too hard on her." Sylvie let out a contented purr at his soothing laughter, her innocence shining through her wide, innocent eyes as she gazed at us. Despite her mischievous antics, it was hard to stay mad at her for long. I relented, shaking my head with a sigh. "All right, Sylvie, just make sure it doesn't happen again." Sylvie nodded eagerly, her tail wagging back and forth in delight. "May I sit here?" I turned my head to find Kathy Ln, her long hair pulled back, standing beside me in her disciplinary committee uniform. "Sure, go ahead." I gestured towards the seat next to mine, a friendly smile on my face as I welcomed her presence. Her expression didn't change, but she did give me a slight bow before removing her notes, carefully straightening out her skirt in a refined manner before taking a seat. "Well, look who we have here. If it isn't Princess Kathy Ln and my rivals, Arthur and Rimuru Lewin." Ferret's voice cut through the air as he confidently strutted towards us. "Hey there, Fei-Fi," Arthur drawled, a hint of amusement in his voice as he observed Ferret's antics. He leaned back in his chair, his casual demeanor a stark contrast to Ferret's energy. "Aren't you pretty active this morning?" "Well, it is a fine morning today. Didn't the commencement ceremony today make you excited?" Ferret harumphed as he took the seat on Art's left. "While it is a bit late into the morning, It is still technically the morning, so. Good morning. A rather upbeat, bulky man wearing a light armor clapped to get everyone's attention. His appearance seemed more fitting for a low-class adventurer rather than a professor, but his mana core level indicated otherwise, a surprising light yellow stage. Well, we have quite the crowd of students. I know my class is always popular, but I'm honored to have this many students. My name is Professor Geist. Welcome ladies and gents, and welcome DC officers. It is a privilege to have you in my class. I couldn't tell whether he was being sarcastic or not when he directed his little welcome at us, but I chose to not mind it. Most, if not all, of us were in attendance out of obligation rather than true interest. The mandatory nature of the class was evident in the lackluster expressions worn by the majority of students. This is practical mana manipulation, or PMM as I like to call it. That means we will be doing things very practically. Practically, in my definition, means through example, because what better way to learn than through hands-on experience, right? His words reverberated through the class, waking up anyone that might have still been sleepy. Leaning against the lectern, Professor Geist scanned the room with a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. He examined the class with lust in his eyes. When his gaze landed upon Kathleen, his eyes burned with an unsettling hint of lust. Though our disgust simmered beneath the surface, we restrained ourselves, aware that immediate action may lead others to think we were overreacting. I understand that most of you are first years and that many of you have just awakened not too long ago. However, parents have been more and more dedicated in teaching their children as soon as they awaken before they even send them here, so even that assumption is mostly inaccurate. However, for the sake of equality, I shall assume that every first year is a beginner in mana manipulation, of course with a few exceptions, i.e. the four sitting right there. He pointed to the four of us, a mischievous wink in his eye, drawing attention and curious gazes from everyone inside the room. Internally sighing, I realized that Professor Geist seemed hell-bent on making this class a challenging experience for me. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as his piercing gaze lingered on us, and even Kathleen, whose typically expressionless face rarely betrayed her emotions, displayed a faint twitch of annoyance. This is really a problem, don't you agree, Ri? Art's voice echoed in my mind, his mockery palpable. I nodded in agreement, the weariness evident in my own mental response. Did you do something to him? He seemed strangely focused on you, I asked, unable to shake the feeling that Art had somehow provoked the situation. A chuckle reverberated within my thoughts as Art responded knowingly, well, let's just say I may have done something that could have offended him. Professor Geist's voice sliced through the air, bringing our attention back to the classroom. I'm sure everyone, including myself, is curious as to what sort of level and ability our newly formed DC has. They're the ones that are going to be protecting the students here in this academy after all, right? Several shouts of agreement spawned from around the room, intertwining with the simmering undercurrent of anticipation. As the spotlight fell on us, I turned to Art with a playful smirk, urging him to take the stage. Great, now it's your turn to shine, Art, I whispered. Why me? Art protested, his confusion and annoyance evident in his furrowed brow. Neither Kathleen nor Fairith would win, I pointed out, glancing at our teammates who seemed to reluctantly acknowledge the truth. So, it's up to you. Art's eyes narrowed as he weighed his options. What about you? Why don't you volunteer? A mischievous smile played at the corners of my lips as I replied, my tone dripping with slyness. If you don't mind dealing with his body later, I'll gladly go. Rolling his eyes, Art reluctantly agreed, recognizing the logic in my argument. If you insist, I suppose I can volunteer myself for this little demonstration of yours. As he stood up, Fairith followed suit, making way for Art to navigate towards the arena. All eyes in the classroom fixated on Art's purposeful strides, whispers swirling among the students as curiosity filled the air. The tension was palpable as Professor Geist, his smirk still firmly in place, redirected his attention towards my brother. Ah, excellent. So eager to volunteer, I see. Very well, Arthur, correct. His voice dripped with a peculiar blend of condescension and mockery. Show us what you're capable of. Arthur Lewin Pav as I cautiously stepped onto the battling platform, the weight of everyone's expectant eyes bore down on me, their collective anticipation creating an almost tangible pressure in the air. The room fell into a hushed silence, broken only by the faint murmurs of the spectators. As I prepared myself for whatever Professor Geist had planned, my heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins as my mind raced, trying to come up with a strategy on the spot. I hope you're ready, Lewin, Geist taunted, his voice dripping with arrogant condescension. I highly doubt a first year like yourself can handle what's coming. I flashed him a confident grin, refusing to let his belittling words affect me. I'll do my best to prove you wrong, Professor, I retorted, my voice infused with the irony. He chuckled, the sound echoing throughout the room. Very well then. I expect a lot from you being the DC captain's brother, he said, looking at Rimuru briefly before returning his gaze to me, his eyes boring into mine as if trying to gauge my strength. I could feel him checking my core. I was wearing the bracelet Aya and Aliyah gave me, its enchantment concealing my true core stage. Geist wouldn't be able to see my full potential. How about we get started, Professor Geist, I replied, an edge of sarcastic confidence creeping into my voice, aiming to unsettle his composure. Grip tightening around my sword, Dawn's Ballad. Its translucent teal blade triggered gasps and murmurs of awe from the onlookers. Even Geist himself couldn't help but cast a longing, wide-eyed glance at my weapon. An impressive choice of weapon, I must say, Geist commented, an almost begrudging admiration seeping into his tone. Since you are an augmenter, I suppose it would be fair to let you choose the method in which I fight. It doesn't matter, I responded simply, my voice exuding unwavering confidence. A flicker of annoyance flashed across Geist's face, a vein visibly throbbing in irritation. He glared back at me, his wounded pride simmering beneath the surface. I insist, he retorted, his voice dripping with irritation. Very well, if you must, I acquiesced. Then please go with what you are most confident in. I took a couple steps forward, my face still peering deep into him, studying his every movement and action. Scum or not, this professor was still a light yellow class veteran augmenter. Underestimating him would be a mistake. Observing the professor's once cheerful countenance transform into a scowl and his face redden, it was evident that he yearned to make a lasting impression on his class. Unfortunately, I had not been affording him much acknowledgement. I wasn't planning on volunteering, but since my brother forced me, I don't have much of a choice. Let's end this quickly, I thought to myself, tightening my grip on Dawn's Ballad. Very well then, I'll be sure to go easy on you, Geist said grudgingly, a glimmer of amusement dancing in his eyes. His lips curled back into a light-hearted smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. With a smooth motion, Geist pulled out his sword, its blade glinting menacingly under the light. He made his way towards me, his sword dancing around him gracefully as he handled it with little effort. Without warning, he blinked towards me, swinging his blade down with a force that wasn't exactly easy. The power behind his attack was palpable. His sword was imbued in a layer of blue fire, its heat radiating off of it in formidable waves. My instincts kicked in, and I swiftly parried, my own wind attribute mana keeping the trail of fire at bay. Since I was only able to use wind and earth mana, I had to really think about how to best utilize my assets to overcome a stronger opponent. While it would have been easy to use blue fire myself, I didn't have that option right now. Geist's bombardment continued, the force of each swing and stab getting faster and stronger with every passing second. It was as if he was testing the limit of what I could handle. Every time I parried or dodged his attack with ease, his subsequent attacks would be kicked up a notch, challenging me further. Rather than relying on spells to weather his attacks, I opted for a different approach, drawing upon my mana to strengthen myself while relying on pure sword technique. This choice seemed to irk our professor, his frustration apparent as he struggled to break through my defenses. I'm sure the disciplinary committee consists of more than a bunch of elusive rats, Geist called out, his voice tinged with a hint of mockery. Do I really need to attack when our esteemed professor can't even land a single blow on a first year? Perhaps you underestimate us, I retorted, my words dripping with an innocent facade while my eyes sparkled with amusement. A flash of anger darkened Geist's features as he lunged forward, his movements becoming increasingly aggressive. The determination in his eyes was unmistakable, his desire to prove himself superior to me driving him forward. But I refused to be cowed by his intimidation tactics. Adjusting my stance to a more solid foundation, my grip on Dawn's Ballad tightened. With practiced grace, I sidestepped his sword, empowered by wind mana that enhanced my speed. Swift as a gust of wind, I countered his attack, the clash of our blades sending sparks into the air. His strike carried a force that pushed me back slightly, but I dug my heels in, resolute in my determination not to yield an inch. Geiss's frustration was palpable, evident in the way his eyes narrowed with each failed attempt to land a hit on me. The once confident and composed professor now appeared desperate, his swings becoming increasingly wild and reckless. A hushed silence filled the room, onlookers holding their breath, their eyes riveted to the unfolding battle. As Geist sensed his attacks falling flat, a surge of desperation coursed through him. With a rapid flick of his wrist, he unleashed a torrent of searing fire from his blade, aiming to catch me off guard and finally gain the upper hand. However, his efforts were in vain. In a split second, I summoned forth my mastery of Earth Mana, creating a formidable shield that absorbed the flames with ease, leaving me unscathed. A smirk tugged at the corner of my lips, my confidence radiating through every fiber of my being. I couldn't resist taunting him, relishing in the opportunity to turn the tables. "Is that the best you've got, Professor?" I taunted, my voice dripping with a mixture of arrogance and amusement. He didn't answer, his lips contorted in anger instead. By this time, a couple of the students had already caught on that this wasn't just a simple demonstration, some whispering if they should call the director or the student council over. While my comrades, the DC members, were quiet. Yet, their inaction seemed to discourage the students from taking action, and soon they returned to their silent observation, captivated by the unfolding spectacle. Fairith and Kathleen gazed at me with a mixture of awe and admiration, their eyes shining with reverence for my skills. Rimuru, on the other hand, entertained himself with a playful smile, clearly deriving amusement from the scenario. Roused by his mounting frustration, Geist intensified his attacks, unleashing a barrage of spells in conjunction with his physical strikes. With a swift incantation, he conjured a blazing pillar of blue fire erupting from the ground beneath me. Reacting swiftly, I effortlessly sidestepped the fiery onslaught, countering with a precise strike to his vulnerable neck. Caught off guard by my unexpected move, Geist staggered backward much farther than necessary to evade my blade, a small bead of sweat glistening on his forehead. The realization of my skill was finally beginning to sink in, mingling with his frustration. "Even rats become deadly when cornered, Professor," I mocked, a snide grin dancing on my lips as I closed the distance between us in an instant. Appearing right next to him, I willed wind mana around the blade of my sword as I prepared a spell. Each swing I executed created a mesmerizing, invisible path of air, confusing Geist and making it difficult for him to anticipate my moves. Every swipe, every lunge, and every swing I took carved a trail of ethereal wind in its trajectory, leaving Geist scrambling to block each blow. Grim determination etched itself onto Geist's face as he abandoned any facade of confidence, focusing solely on defending against my relentless assault. With each strike, he was forced to step back, inching closer to the edge of the arena. The flames upon his sword flickered helplessly, weakened and diminished by the relentless barrage of my attacks. I knew the moment had come, the climax of this exhilarating duel approaching rapidly. It was time to bring this battle to its conclusion. I willed the surface of the ground where he was about to take his next step to concave in, making him slightly lose his balance. As expected of a veteran augmenter, he stumbled for a split second but was able to soon regain his balance. However, that split second was all that I needed. Tempest. The dozen trails of wind that emanated from each of my mana-infused blades came to life, glowing vibrantly before propelling forward with incredible speed. My assault reached its crescendo as the velocity of my attacks increased, causing my blades to become a mere blur. Simultaneously, the Tempest spell I had just activated trailed behind each strike, transforming my flurry of blade and gusts of wind into an unstoppable chain. "Ah!" His pained cry echoed through the arena as he stood no chance against the overwhelming quantity of attacks. Overwhelmed, he toppled backward onto the ground, landing on his butt and desperately rolling out of the fighting area. The protective barrier that shielded against all spells trembled under the relentless bombardment of my tempestuous onslaught. Cracks spider-webbed across its surface, the once impenetrable defense now faltering. With a resounding shatter, the barrier finally succumbed to the force of my spell, crumbling into oblivion. Only one last blade of wind managed to breach the barrier and graze my professor's neck, leaving behind a thin, crimson trickle of blood. Though fortunate, the professor's mana-imbued body couldn't spare him from the terror that gripped him. He lay flat on his back, his pallid face mirroring his fear, knees trembling uncontrollably as I buried my blade in the ground right next to his carotid artery. "Thank you for your guidance," I said, my voice measured and calm as I casually withdrew my sword, gracefully relocating it to the depths of my dimension ring, not breaking eye contact with the defeated professor.